Let me tell you something that nobody in this space is honest enough to say directly. The difference between a man who makes a mature woman feel genuinely desired and a man who makes her feel merely liked is not his looks. It is not his money. It is not even his personality. It is his hands. Specifically, it is whether his hands know how to say the things that the most carefully chosen words in the English language are neurologically incapable of communicating. There is a landmark study out of McGill University that I want you to know about before we go any further. Researchers asked participants to communicate 12 distinct emotional states to a stranger using only touch on the forearm. No words, no facial expressions, no context, just touch. The result: participants correctly identified the emotional state being communicated with accuracy rates between 48 and 83%, depending on the emotion. Love, desire, and gratitude were among the highest, higher than verbal communication in several categories. Your touch is not a supplement to what you are saying. In certain emotional registers, it is more accurate than language. And for a mature woman, a woman who has heard every line, sat through every rehearsed speech, and learned to filter out the gap between what men say and what they mean, this matters at a level that younger women have not yet developed the sensitivity to fully register. She does not need more words. She needs contact that tells the truth. Tonight, I am going to give you 7 specific touches. Each one is backed by peer-reviewed research. Each one has a name, a mechanism, and a specific reason it lands differently on a woman over 40 than on anyone else. And I need to warn you before we start. 2 of these touches are so simple that your first instinct will be to dismiss them. Do not. Those are the 2 that mature women have described to me in the most visceral, specific, emotional terms. And the 7th touch, the last one, is the one I have been saving because its psychological mechanism is so well documented that cognitive behavioral therapists use it as a clinical intervention for couples who have lost emotional trust entirely. I will explain exactly why when we get there. Let us start now. Touch 1, the anchor hand. This one happens before anything else, before the conversation deepens, before any real connection has formed, and it sets the neurological tone for everything that follows. The anchor hand is the brief, warm, completely intentional placement of your hand on her forearm or the back of her hand during the first few minutes of genuine conversation. Not a pat, not a squeeze, a placement. Flat palm, full contact, 3 to 5 seconds, released slowly. Dr. Nicholas Guéguen at the University of South Brittany has published multiple studies on the effect of brief incidental touch on social compliance and emotional evaluation. In one study, men who briefly touched a woman's forearm while making a request were significantly more likely to receive a positive response than men who did not touch at all. But the more relevant finding for our purposes is this: women who were briefly touched on the forearm during an initial conversation rated the interaction as warmer, more meaningful, and the man as more confident and more trustworthy, even when they could not identify that the touch had occurred. She is not consciously tracking it. Her nervous system is. For a mature woman, this touch matters because she has developed over years what I would describe as a trust latency, the default delay between meeting someone and allowing genuine warmth to form. It is not coldness. It is protection built from experience. The anchor hand, placed correctly with genuine warmth and without agenda, does not override that protection. It simply shortens the latency. It gives her nervous system a real data point about your internal state, regulated, unhurried, comfortable in your own skin, before your words have had enough time to either earn or erode that impression. Touch 2, the redirecting hand. This is the touch most men already do, but almost none of them do it in the way that makes it register. The redirecting hand is the guide, your hand at the small of her back as you move through a space together, your palm briefly at her shoulder as you shift direction, the gentle physical orientation of her presence relative to yours as you navigate from one place to another. Most men who do this are doing it as a social gesture, functional, automatic, polite, and she feels the difference between functional and intentional at a level she could not articulate but would stake her judgment on. Research from the journal Psychological Science documents that the quality of touch, specifically whether it is perceived as expressing genuine positive regard for the person being touched, is processed by a separate neural pathway from touch that is perceived as neutral or instrumental. Warm, positively intended touch activates the medial prefrontal cortex, an area associated with social reward. Functional touch does not. What makes the redirecting hand land in the first category is entirely internal. The difference between a man who places his hand at her back, because that is what you do in this situation, and a man who places his hand at her back, because in this specific moment, he is genuinely, warmly, completely aware of her presence next to his. The intention is not visible, but the neurological signature of the touch it produces is measurably different. And she measures it. A woman in her late 50s once described it this way in a conversation I will never forget. She said, "Most men guide you like they are parking a car. He guided me like I was something worth being careful with. I felt it in my chest before I understood what had happened." Touch 3. The 2-second temple. This is the first of the two touches I warned you not to dismiss. Because the moment I describe it, you will think, that cannot be the one. At a moment of genuine emotional warmth, after she has said something real, after laughter has settled into something quieter, after a moment where the quality of the interaction has shifted into something more honest, you bring your hand up and let your fingers rest briefly against her temple or against the side of her face. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Released with the same unhurried quality it arrived with. That is it. Dr. Sue Johnson, founder of Emotionally Focused Therapy and one of the most cited attachment researchers currently working, describes what she calls loaded touch moments. These are brief physical contacts that activate the adult attachment system with a speed and intensity that longer touches in neutral moments cannot match. Her research documents that the face is the highest stakes zone for attachment touch in adults because it is the area we protect most instinctively. Access to it signals a level of trust that the rest of the body simply does not convey at the same intensity. When you touch her face, briefly, gently, with the specific unhurried quality of someone who is completely at ease in the intimacy of the gesture, you are activating an attachment response in her nervous system that her brain has not authorized yet. It arrives before the decision. She feels something before she has decided what to do with the feeling. For a mature woman, this touch carries a specific weight that younger women do not yet have the context to feel fully. She has been touched by men who wanted something from her. She has almost never been touched by a man who simply, quietly, with no agenda attached, wanted to be close to her for a moment. And when that touch arrives on her face, all the experience she carries that has taught her to recognize the difference between those two things recognizes this as the second one. Immediately. Unmistakably. If what I am describing is opening something for you right now, take 2 seconds and hit the like button. Because this is the kind of information that changes how a man moves through every interaction he has with women from this moment forward. And every person who engages helps another man find this at exactly the right time. Now, let me give you touch 4. Touch 4, the slow thumb. I almost did not put this one in, not because it does not work, because of how well it works. This feels like handing out something that should require more effort to earn. The slow thumb happens when you are already in contact. Her hand in yours, your hand on her arm, your palm against her back. And without drawing any attention to it, without looking down, without interrupting whatever conversation is happening, your thumb begins to move slowly, back and forth, small, deliberate, completely unhurried strokes against her skin. You do not announce it. You just do it. Researchers at the University of Gothenburg identified a specific class of unmyelinated nerve fibers called C-tactile afferents, present in hairy skin across the body, that respond specifically and exclusively to slow, gentle stroking touch. When activated, they send signals directly to the insular cortex, the brain region responsible for emotional closeness, intimacy, and the felt experience of being connected to another person. Not the intellectual sense of connection, the bodily felt experience of it. This is the neurological mechanism behind why that specific kind of touch produces what it produces. You are not stimulating nerve endings in the general sense. You are activating a dedicated biological channel whose only function is to produce the felt experience of emotional intimacy. And because the thumb moves quietly, without performance, without calling attention to itself, she registers it as something other than intention. She thinks, He does not even realize he is doing this. This is just how he is. And the moment a mature woman thinks that, the moment she believes your tenderness is structural rather than strategic, something in her evaluation of you shifts permanently. Touch 5. The forehead press. Foreheads together. Eyes that close naturally. The world that goes quiet. This touch requires vulnerability from both people simultaneously. You cannot do it from a distance. You cannot do it casually. To press your forehead against hers, you have to slow down completely, close the space between you entirely, and allow a silence that most people fill immediately because the intimacy of it is uncomfortable without the words to explain it. Dr. John Gottman, whose research on relationship dynamics spans over 40 years and tens of thousands of couples, identifies what he calls bids for connection, small physical and emotional gestures that, when responded to fully, build what he calls the emotional bank account of a relationship. The forehead press is one of the highest denomination bids in his framework. It asks for everything and it gives everything simultaneously. His research shows that couples who engage in this kind of quiet, non escalating physical intimacy regularly demonstrate significantly higher relationship satisfaction scores and significantly lower likelihood of separation, independent of how much conflict they have. For a mature woman who has lived through enough to know that grand romantic gestures are easy and daily quiet intimacy is rare, this touch does not read as romantic theater. It reads as emotional truth, as a man saying, without opening his mouth, that he is fully, completely, entirely here, not performing being here, here. The man who can hold this without rushing it, without breaking it with a joke because the silence became heavy, without escalating it into something else, that man has communicated more about who he is in 30 seconds of stillness than most men manage in months of conversation. Touch 6. The wordless. Pull you are sitting beside her or standing next to her, and without a word, without a warning, without asking permission, you reach over and close the distance between you. Your arm around her shoulder pulls her in. Your hand at her waist moves her closer. No announcement, no come here. Just the decision, expressed entirely through movement, that the space between you was more than you wanted. Attachment researchers call this proximity seeking behavior, the instinctive reduction of physical distance that secure attachment produces in adults. John Bowlby, who founded attachment theory, documented that the need to be physically close to a trusted person does not diminish with age. It changes in expression. And the adult version of it, expressed by a man who simply pulls a woman closer because her presence at a distance felt like something he wanted to correct, activates the same deep attachment circuitry that was built in childhood. For a mature woman, this touch rewrites a specific story. Many women over 40 have spent years in relationships where affection arrived only when the other person wanted something from it, where closeness was transactional rather than spontaneous. The wordless pull, done with the specific quality of a man who is not initiating anything, not building toward anything, simply wanting less space between him and a person whose presence he values, and tells a story that contradicts every version of that old story. It says, I want you near me, not for what follows, just near me. That is a sentence that has been missing from her life for longer than she would ever say out loud. Touch 7. The long hold. Here is the one I saved. The one I promised you carries more psychological and neurological weight than everything else on this list combined. The one that relationship therapists actually prescribe as a clinical intervention. It is a hug, but not the hug you have been giving. The long hold is a full chest to chest, both arms engaged embrace that lasts a minimum of 20 seconds. Not a quick squeeze, not the back patting acknowledgement of each other's existence that passes for a hug in most adult interactions. 20 seconds of full, genuine, unhurried contact with no agenda inside it. The number 20 is not arbitrary. It comes directly from research published in the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology. Dr. Kathleen Light and her colleagues at the University of North Carolina measured oxytocin levels, cortisol levels, blood pressure, and heart rate in women before and after extended physical contact with their partners. Hugs lasting 20 seconds or longer produced a significant oxytocin surge, a measurable cortisol reduction, lower blood pressure, and a shift in autonomic nervous system activity from sympathetic to parasympathetic, from fight or flight to rest and bond. This is the state in which emotional openness becomes possible, in which walls come down not through decision, but through biology. Dr. Gottman has recommended the extended hold specifically for couples rebuilding trust after betrayal or disconnection because it produces the neurochemical conditions for vulnerability that no amount of conversation can replicate. For a mature woman, a woman who has become her own support system out of necessity, who has spent years being the competent one, the strong one, the one who holds everything together because there was no one else to do it, this touch is not romantic. It is restorative. When you hold her for 20 seconds without rushing toward the end of it, without the slight restlessness of a man who is waiting for the appropriate moment to release, without any signal that you have somewhere else to be, she feels something that she has been holding alone for years let go. Not dramatically, not with tears necessarily, with the specific, quiet, cellular level relief of a person who has finally been allowed to put down something heavy. She will not be able to tell you exactly what changed. She will know that something did. 7 touches, each one backed by the names and numbers of researchers who spent careers documenting exactly what happens inside a woman's nervous system when these specific forms of contact arrive from the right man in the right way. But here is what connects all 7 of them. What makes the difference between the version that produces everything I have described and the version that produces nothing? None of these touches work as techniques. Deployed strategically, calibrated for effect, executed in service of an outcome you are monitoring in real time, they produce the specific mild deflation that all performed intimacy produces. She feels it, not the touch, the performance behind the touch. What makes them work is the specific quality of internal presence that an older man carries when he has done the real work of becoming genuinely real inside his own life. The settledness, the absence of urgency, the complete, unhurried comfort inside his own skin that means when his hands make contact with her, what transmits through them is not a gesture. It is him. And that, the actual, complete, undivided presence of a man who is fully there, is what a mature woman has been waiting to feel, not in her mind, in her body, in the specific, involuntary, completely honest response of a nervous system that has finally encountered something it recognizes as real. Subscribe to this channel right now, because this is where we give you the science, the names, the numbers, and the complete honest truth about what touch actually communicates between a man and a woman at the level that matters most. Like this video and share it with someone who has been reaching for the right words when what she has been waiting for was never words at all. And whatever you do, do not miss the next video, because what comes next goes even further into exactly how a man builds the internal state that makes every one of these touches land the way I described. See you there.